Greetings, my friend. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives. You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
10 minutes left. Yeah, but there's still some time. It's not the final score. We need more than the numbers we're given. Show us you live and breathe the game. You're more than a name. That's what we came for. We can bring you more than the score. Every story. Let's take this thing off of the field into the real world, away from the numbers, away from the numbers.
Hello and welcome to episode 447 of the AFTN podcast. I am Joe DC, and this week I am joined by Nicholas Ruprecht.
Hello, greetings.
Nick, long time no chat. How are you feeling about the season so far for the Whitecaps?
Optimistic, I would say, especially given the format where, most teams get to go to the playoffs. I'd like to think that the Whitecaps are one of those middling of the road kind of teams that could get into the playoffs.
Yeah. In most people's season previews, apart from Eastern Conference biased MLS.com journalists, the Whitecaps were kind of lingering right underneath the playoff bar. But have your expectations changed based on what you've seen in the first two games?
I mean, I think the Whitecaps have always historically been known as a team that comes out pretty slow. So it's kind of interesting, at least over the first two games, to see like a good win against Portland and arguably what should have been a win against Toronto as well. So maybe I'm just on the optimism swing here.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy amount of optimism going around the Whitecaps fan base at the moment. That last game against Toronto and the deflection off Baldissimo's face, I can't think of a more unlucky sequence. You see them every now and then on YouTube clips, but it seems to happen to the Whitecaps more than other teams.
Maybe that's just our bias because, we watch the Whitecaps maybe too much.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, at the end of the day, that was a really good game. Coming from behind on the road, in quotes.
Yeah.
I think it counted anyway. At any rate, it's on the road. It's a little disappointing, obviously, to lose in a fashion like that. But I thought like the game plan from the start was really good. How the players responded to going down was really good. It was a lot of good things there. And I don't think you can really take that away, although it still does feel like they lost the game. It's just sometimes that happens in life.
Yeah. The Whitecaps are masters of the draw that feels like a loss. Of the team that the Whitecaps have fielded so far in two games have been pretty identical. Who've you liked watching the most out of the starting players?
I think for me personally, I think so far it's been Cavallini, just to see, it, and maybe this is just my perception, but it feels like he's a little bit of a different player. In the sense that he's more confident. He's, he did, an amazing dribble to draw the penalty.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't necessarily dimensions of his game that we were seeing in the previous year.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat to see that, maybe he has a little bit more to offer, or maybe he's finding new tools in his toolbox to bring out. He's not just the like super strong guy, which admittedly he is, but if he can add some more dimension to his game, it's just going to be even harder for teams to play against him, and he's just going to suck those defenders in even more.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll discuss in the Whitecaps section a little bit later the attacking axes that we have, and maybe we can spend a bit more time on Cavallini's role too, because it is, you are right, it seems to be a bit different than the target man that we became accustomed to last year. Before we get into our Colorado preview in our first section, I think we need a bit of a warm-up in MLS jargon. So we'll go to this week's Beauty and the Beast.
Someone fetch a priest. You can't say no to the Beauty and the Beast, darling.
Welcome to this week's Beauty and the Beast. I'm once again joined by the wonderful Caroline.
Hello.
So, Caroline, this is our third week doing this feature. How has your quality of life changed in that time? Knowing about designated players and, what was it last week? The Supporters Shield.
I feel like it's making COVID easier on me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really easing all the struggles.
Yeah. We've been calling it Beauty and the Beast up to this point. Last week you suggested some names that your sisters had. This week we have a suggestion from the Whitecaps community. And I'm going to run it by you now, okay? MLSplaining instead of mansplaining, MLSplaining.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I feel like whoever suggested that picked up on the vibe we were giving with our ideas and just made it better, but still, I feel like it...
Well, I said this at the very start when we did the first episode. This is probably the only topic that I know more about than you.
No. Physics.
The only exciting topic. All right, let's let that name simmer a bit, and then we'll come back to it.
MLSplaining.
Yeah, it's a little bit
It's
too many consonants in there, but it kind of works, right?
It works.
Okay.
I like it.
Let's sit on it for a week.
And it's funny because I'm the one explaining, kind of.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, not really, actually. You're doing most of the explaining.
Soon you'll be able to explain just about everything to do with MLS and the Whitecaps.
Oh, yeah.
This week, we're going to talk about something called the international window.
The international window.
Yeah. First impression on the international window? What do you think that is?
I feel like it's something to do with, like, a timeline.
Okay.
During which...
Like a window of opportunity?
A window of time,
okay.
Yeah, of opportunity, during which...
You're right about that.
What? Let me figure out your thought.
International.
Yeah, during which maybe they can trade or buy players internationally.
Okay, so what you described is the international transfer window, which is
It's
different thing.
basically the same name.
You probably get points for that. But
Is
the
there,
international
do we
window,
have a point system for this?
We could invent one if you want. No, the international window is something a little bit different.
It's just international window, not international transfer window.
Yes. So the players who play for the Whitecaps or other MLS teams sometimes are good enough to play for their national team as well. Not many of them, but like the Whitecaps have a lot of Canadian players.
Wait, from there, can I try to guess?
Yes.
Is it like the time when they're allowed to go play for their team?
Their national team.
Their national team?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. So
It wasn't too far.
Yeah, you were very close. Closer than designated player that we did the first week, or supporters shield that you...
Well, the name is not as...
Some of these names actually make
ambiguous.
sense, I guess, is the difference. But anyway, international windows, some of the players leave their club and go play for their team. And usually, like, I'm a Manchester United fan. When all those Manchester...
You are?
Yeah.
Really?
when all of those Manchester United players go to their national team, Manchester United don't play because they wouldn't have any players to play, right?
Yeah. Or they have really sucky players.
Well, that's not the case with the Whitecaps. When the good players, quote unquote good players, go to play for their national team, quite often the Whitecaps still have games to play.
Well, it gives a chance to the players who may be on the bench more.
Yeah, but it creates a lot of problems because let's say you had a really good striker, and on your team you're going to have a backup guy, because that really good striker could leave for 2 weeks to go to play for his national team and miss a game or two.
Yeah.
So it can be kind of annoying. There used to be a time where there was like playoff games around an international window, so they had to like move playoff games and stuff like that. So
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
But why don't they just do what the Premier League does?
great question. It's kind of scheduling and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because the Premier League plays from August to May, but in North America we play from March to like November. So the schedule is a bit different.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sometimes there's like a World Cup right in the middle of the.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's the international window. Thumbs up, thumbs down for the name
Name's good.
and the concept.
I think the concept is not very well applied if it's causing so many problems.
Yeah. Well, you can join the masses of people who think it's not really well thought out. Yeah.
I feel like you get really good organizer on that, and it should
Yeah.
be fixed.
Next week we should profile this guy called Don Garber, and then we can jump off from there. He's the
Who's
commissioner.
Don?
Yeah. He's the commissioner of the league.
What is a commissioner? Of
Okay, maybe we could use that next time.
No idea.
And for the time being, thank you very much, Caroline, again for coming on this week's MLSplaining / Beauty and the Beast.
I'm trying to say it nicely. MLSplaining.
MLSplaining. There you go.
MLSplaining.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Talk to you next week. Well, we live together, so we'll talk to
Yeah,
each other
please
soon.
talk to me before next week.
You'll talk to the fans next week.
Someone fetch a priest. You can't say no to the beauty and the beast, darling.
That was Beauty and the Beast / MLSplaining for this week. Thank you to Steve from the Sunday Show for recommending that name. And yeah, hopefully Caroline can come back next week with more Whitecaps insight and critique on MLS jargon. So, Colorado, Nick, the Colorado Rapids. Every time I Google them, I always type in the Colorado Avalanche, but that's my problem. They have not had a good start to the season so far.
Which is interesting because like last season, like they got the playoff spot. We didn't, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, there's a lot of controversy, I think, around that, at least from, you know, being a Whitecaps fan.
Yeah.
But definitely I agree. Like this year, it seems like they're starting off on the wrong foot because on paper, they should be a really, really good team, or at least a team decent enough to get into the playoffs. I think my perspective, a lot of that has to do with people that are missing.
Yeah, it's a good point. And they've brought a lot of the same key players back, right? The Whitecaps didn't have the pleasure of playing Colorado last year, but you look through the team sheet and players like Price and Acosta, I guess, is kind of new for the Whitecaps, but a lot of familiar faces like Rubio, Barrios, formerly of FC Dallas, Danny Wilson in center back.
Acosta,
Yeah, Acosta.
fantastic player.
Yeah, like it's a good team on paper. Like I think Mosqueda is still the team too, unless I'm mistaken. But like you don't look at that team and think 1 point out of a possible 6, right?
Yeah.
In the first 2 games, and it's still early. They could beat the Whitecaps, and then they would be level on points with the Whitecaps. It's kind of the perils of looking at the table too early in the season, I guess.
Very true. Very true. But I think, you know, it speaks, but the fact that they lost to Austin,
Yes.
an expansion team, in such a manner when they were up 1-0, I think that speaks to a little bit of the problems going on right now. And I don't necessarily think it's a player problem. Maybe it's more of a tactical problem and like a front office issue of, do you have enough players to cover, you know, your decisions that you made? You know, if you're deciding to play Acosta in the back, where I don't think he's necessarily having the best impact, well, you have to be prepared for your midfield to be really disjointed and run over, like it was in the Austin game. Yeah.
They played Acosta at left back last game. If you look across that back line, it screams MLS to me. It's Acosta, Trusty, Danny Wilson, and Keegan Rosenberry in right back, with Yarbrough in goal. So yeah, It just
Yeah.
looked like someone's fantasy team.
And like honestly, like I like Rosenberry, and I think Yarborough is a decent goaltender as well, like in terms of like MLS level, and obviously Acosta I think is fantastic, and I mean I think for the American national team he's occasionally played that position too, so it's not like he's incredibly unfamiliar at that position. But I think with the problem was more in the midfield, just couldn't link up there, and they were kind of getting overrun. And I think they need Acosta in the midfield. It'll be interesting to see in this game if they're going to make that adjustment. Do they put Acosta in the midfield, or do they keep him where they were having him? I think that might just be the whole question of whether the Whitecaps are going to win or not, is where is Acosta playing? I hate to boil it. I mean, it's a pretty simplistic view of it, but given the previous, games, that might be the biggest decision, is where's he going to play?
Yeah, it's hard to run the game from left back, right? Very few players can do that. But if Acosta was in the midfield with Jack Price beside him to do the defensive covering and have Acosta go box to box, then that completely transforms what the team would look like, right?
Mm-hmm. And admittedly, then you're going to have to put somebody else at left back who maybe that's not their natural position. But I think the argument would be, well, better to have your weakness at left back than your weakness in the midfield.
Yeah, that kind of sets up a very interesting midfield battle. Like if you look at the Whitecaps midfield two, I guess if they stay with the 4-4-2 of Bikel and Baldissimo, wouldn't you be tempted to put like a game-changing midfielder up against those two who lacked maybe the experience or the cunning to like go toe-to-toe with someone like Acosta? What do you think?
And the fact of the matter is you've played him out of position in quotes for kind of 2 games now, and you haven't produced results. So now is a great time to try it out and see if it works.
Yeah, really good point. I wouldn't be surprised if the Whitecaps had 2 plans, one for Acosta at left back and one for Acosta in midfield, because I think we've kind of identified him as the focal point, or at least the player with the most potential upside. But that being said, he was very poor in the last game against Austin. But yeah, hard to expect anyone to come out of there with a good score after losing 3-1. Nick, they played a 4-4-1-1. What do you think about that? Typically teams play that when they know they have issues defending and they have to make sure there's enough numbers behind the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I understand that, but then when you look at how they played that 4-4-1-1, right? The problem was that they were having trouble getting out of the back. That was the really big problem. Like, you look at 2 of Austin's goals came from really good pressing and turnovers, and maybe maybe that's something that they have to think about is, okay, maybe this is a game where we as Colorado need to sit back deeper and not think about necessarily playing it out of the back. Maybe we should just boot it up the field. But then who do they have as their target man, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Rubio played up front last week, and he's a bit more knock the ball over the back line than at your target man kind of a guy.
Yeah. So it's kind of, given the players that they have, they might be being forced to play this way, But then at the same time, they don't really have the players with the technical. I don't mean to knock Colorado completely and say they don't have any technical players. They do. But when you're playing your technical passer in the left back position, that's not the best place for him. Yeah, so
I think we're anticipating negative tactics, but you never know, right? Like, maybe they've penciled this Whitecaps game in as the game that they go for it, and they come out like in a 4-3-3 or something like that.
Yeah, like maybe they go for it, but I think they know how exposed they are on their flanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, the Whitecaps, during these last 2 games have been, reasonably good at attacking the flanks of the other teams that they're playing against and hitting them in transition. And that's the question is, will the Whitecaps have seen that, oh, this pressing by Austin worked really well? And, maybe we're going to try it here and put a lot of pressure on that back line. And if I'm Colorado, that's my question, right? Is like, how do I go with that? And kind of the answer to that is maybe sit a little bit deeper, wait for the counter, and not necessarily try to play out of the back.
And the Whitecaps don't necessarily have the player to pick a key pass in tight spaces, right? They've definitely been more of a transition team. So maybe that sit back tactic is something that they'll do. A team that's gotten 1 point from 2 games, I don't think they have enough confidence to go for a win, right? They would take another point just to move a little bit higher up the table, even though they'll be well out of a playoff position at this early point anyway.
Yeah, you can make the argument, but then at the same time, like, look at last year, kind of what happened, right?
Yeah.
That kind of same situation towards the end when the playoffs are on the line could happen again, right? Where games are getting canceled, and then it's every game matters, right? So there is a little bit of added randomness, and you probably don't want to necessarily maybe play too negative if you think you can get the point. But I don't know if Colorado is confident enough, given their roster right now, to do that.
Yeah. I think the first 5 minutes of this game will be very telling as to Colorado's intention. Did they spend all week thinking about dropping back and having 2 banks of 4, or do they actually have a strategy to attack? I think very early in the game we'll find that out. Nick, we've talked kind of about the tactics. It's time for a little game to have a look at the numbers. So just like we've been doing all season, this year's game is called Over Under. So Nick and I will pitch stats from the 2020 Colorado Rapids stats sheet at each other and ask for an over-under on the proposed statistic. And if you're right, you get a point. If you're wrong, you don't. Last week, Gideon beat me by 3-2. Still hurts. So, Nick, I'm hoping for a win this week, just like Colorado, just to get a confidence boost for the rest of the season.
I'm hoping to get at least not a goose egg. That would be nice.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, Nick, I'll pitch 3 to you first, and then we'll switch it around, okay?
Okay.
So, Diego Rubio, 15 appearances.
I'm going to say under.
Oh, he got 17, so it was over.
Oh.
Yeah. Surprising, right? Like, there weren't many games last year. Kai Kamara last year, 5 goals.
I'm going to say under.
Under, you're right. One for 2 so far. And finally, William Yarbrough, 3 clean sheets.
Over?
Yeah, he had 4. So you got 2 of 3.
Okay.
All right, so Nick, I need a perfect game to win. But I'll take a draw. I'll take 2 out of 3 and walk away with the point today. So lay the questions on.
Okay. So Drew Moore last season had a 90% pass rate.
Ooh, he was playing in the back. I'll go over. Over.
That is correct. He had 92%.
Okay, good. All right.
Kellyn Acosta, and this is one of my favorite stats, had 6 key passes.
Ooh. Oh, that's tough. That is tough because that's around where I would expect him. I'll go over again.
Correct. He had 7.
Oh, okay. For the win, the next one.
All right. And then Jay Price had 16 passes per game. Yeah, per 90.
Passes per 90. Okay. Under?
That is correct. You went 3 for 3.
Oh, they said it was impossible.
If there's one person you can do it against, it's me.
It's a long season, Nick. There's still a long way to go. Okay, I think our adrenaline is up enough that we can now talk about the Whitecaps. Biggest question for me, 4-4-2. We go with that again?
I think so. It's been working, and it could be that battle of the midfield, like who does Colorado send out to the midfield?
Yeah.
And if you just look at who we've been playing recently, I think the two Baldissimo has been great in the midfield, and I think if we keep the same pairing, I think we can win that midfield battle.
I have a small issue with how Baldissimo is being used. Just a small one. He's doing that thing where, I guess, quarterbacking, where you drop back. When Gutierrez pushes up, he fills in the left back role, and because from there he can see the whole pitch, right?
Yeah.
I love his passing in tight spaces, and he's not in tight spaces there. And the Whitecaps just don't have someone like who can, maybe Dahome and Caicedo, but like if Baldissimo could just be a little bit further up, I feel like he could influence the game more. And as a result of him dropping back, I just feel we go 10 minutes in a game without really knowing that he's there, because he's just spreading the ball around the back, which Andy Rose can do because he's a midfielder, right?
Mm-hmm. It might give him more of an impact, but then I think the question as well is if you send him forward further, that might, especially if you're playing that 4-4-2, that might expose your midfield a little bit. So I think it's a really interesting idea. I just don't think that this is necessarily the formation for him to do it in.
Yeah, maybe a 4-2-3-1 or something is.
Yeah,
I think
something like that. I
4-4-2
think
here
would
to stay.
be much better suited. The 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, and this isn't the most intimidating midfield the Whitecaps will come up against. So maybe more of the stability is more important than experimentation at this point. Get as many points on the board as while the team is playing well, I guess.
Especially early on, and again, like we saw last season, it turns out every point, all the points count.
Yeah.
And if we can get those points early and not have any kind of drop off, that's great. Putting the Whitecaps in a better position.
Yeah, definitely. The goalkeeper and backline kind of speaks for itself at this point. I don't think Bruno Gaspar is at a point where he can replace Jake Nerwinski on the right side yet. Nerwinski's been playing well, so probably no concern there. Godoy,
I think he's been acceptable. I mean, I saw some people making some arguments that he made a mistake on some of the goals, but I think that's maybe a little bit harsh. But he's been passable, I think.
Yeah.
Serviceable.
And Godoy might come back to fill in one of the center back spots. I'm not sure exactly how his fitness is yet, but
I think we need that though. As much as Andy Rose is okay there, I think if we had Godoy back there, would that mistake have happened? Maybe not.
Yeah, I agree. Godoy, yeah, his calm and positioning are much needed. But again, this isn't the game that I'm worried about that kind of a thing. Although Rubio can be a tricky customer sometimes. Gutierrez in left back, I think it was man of the match in both games, and
Yep.
rightly so. The one thing, and I'm really nitpicky sometimes, and this is one of those cases, positioning not always perfect, but he's young, he's learning, and he makes up for it by being really good on the ball.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, he does also have the athleticism to get back, right?
Yes.
And cover. And Tybert, how he's, Tybert is also there. And in some way, Tybert's been much more defensive minded, to cover for Gutierrez going forward, right?
Yeah. I was critical of Tybert starting in left wing, but the dynamic that they have there with Gutierrez and Tybert, it seems to be okay. It's just you don't have the player who can run at a defender, which is what you want from a winger sometimes. Like Gutierrez, he gets forward to cross. He doesn't get forward to beat players, right?
That's true.
Yeah, I can't expect everyone to be Alphonso Davies playing on the left, I guess.
That's very true.
Yeah.
We've been spoiled for far too long.
Yeah, if there's one thing to take away from this preview pod is not everyone is Alphonso Davies. The midfield too, we discussed them a little bit. I think the last thing we can touch on, which we alluded to earlier, was the axes of attack with Caicedo on the right wing, Dahome and Cavallini up front.
Mhm.
Something very exciting is brewing there, Nick.
Yeah, I think, but I also like what you were alluding to with like Gutierrez, he's the one getting crosses, but then it's kind of making a little bit of a lopsided kind of formation in terms of the attack, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to see that, that there is this kind of strong, I don't want to say like preference for that side necessarily, but there definitely is like a stronger attacking intent on one side more than the other.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a square peg and round hole situation. Like, ideally, you would play Caicedo as a winger in a 4-2-3-1 or something like that. They're very much asking him to play that wide midfield role out of his comfort zone. I think he does have the pace to get back and help out, but then again, your fullback on his side is more defensively minded in Jake Nerwinski.
That's true. So like it does allow him more opportunity to get the ball into dangerous places, combine with the Dahome, combine with the midfield, and also take it wide. So I think, but that's the versatility I think of him as a player, is he can do any of those things, and that can help make your attack more dynamic and hopefully cause more problems for that side of the Colorado Rapids.
Yeah, which potentially would be the side that Acosta would play at left back, right? Would, like, if Caicedo was attacking on the Whitecaps' right, that would be Colorado's left. And
that's a really good point, because if he's usually the one, and he's going forward, right? Acosta's going forward, so there might be a lot of space back there as well for Dahome or Cavallini to also exploit, if they want to drift a little wider. Yeah,
I spent a bit of time today thinking, what is it about the Caicedo, Dahome, Cavallini attack that is so exciting, right? And I was thinking, like, is it that one of them is really strong, another one's really technical, and another one's really fast? Not really, because they all are very good in each of those. Like, Cavallini is strong, but he's not slow, right? Dahome is technical, but he's also pretty strong. There just isn't really a weakness. Like, each of those players individually is a good player, and together they play off of each other in such a way that, like, it's like they're on the same wavelength because of the attributes that they share.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really good point, but also they're not really overlapping in each other's domains either.
Yeah.
Right?
Cavallini's doing that thing where he drops deep, and then Dahome and Caicedo know that's the sign for them to take off.
Exactly. It's almost like that kind of, like, I'm not saying Cavallini is like looking to play in the faster characters on his team, but that's kind of what it is almost, right? Like, he's dropping down, maybe he brings a defender with him, right? Yeah. Opening up some of that space for, either of those two pacey players to get in behind. And it's kind of like a false nine. I'm not saying he's a false nine. Don't misinterpret, what I'm
here first,
saying.
Folks. Nicholas Ruprecht, Cavallini is a false nine.
But, like, kind of like that in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Helping spring the wingers into the space behind.
It's not a tactical thing. It's a dynamic that they have, right? Like, like half the time, Cavallini could do that, and if they don't make the run, there was no point in Cavallini dropping in to get the ball, right? But the exciting thing is, I think that's just one of the possible, like, upsides of these three players, right? Like, we've seen it a few times. Cavallini will drop in and turn and spring one of the faster players, but I think there's a lot more. There's, like,
Cavallini can also hold up the ball for either of them.
Yes,
right?
Or if a cross comes in, he could lay it off for either of them, right? Like, there's just so much. If the three players can work together in this way, you can design an entire tactic or a game plan around certain aspects. Like, let's say there's a team that have two weak center backs, right? Then you have Cavallini just sticking to one of the center backs and knocking balls down for the other two who know that they have to run onto the ball, right? It just feels like something we haven't had in such a long time is options on how you want to attack teams.
Maybe the key thing for the Whitecaps going forward this year is making sure those options aren't stale. Like for many years, the Whitecaps have always been that we're this counterattacking team. We have one way to come at you, and we're also going to lob in like a whole bunch of crosses. And, when we didn't have a really big target man who was good in the air, attacking output was piddling, it wasn't up to the standard of being a playoff team consistently. And I guess like the hope is, okay, well, this group, if you look at any of the groups, the best teams in the MLS, their attacks are dynamic. They can come at you in multiple ways. They don't just have one particular way of doing things. They have multiple ways of getting at you and making the chances happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's been that guy at the party who only knows one song on the guitar for too long.
And it's a good song. Don't get me wrong. It's a good song.
It's a really sad song sometimes, but you feel something.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, we've spoken about the Whitecaps a bit. Maybe we should listen to someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Earlier in the week, Michael had a chance to talk to Marc Dos Santos, who will talk about training in the build-up to the game, what he's looking out for on the weekend, and some thoughts on the season so far.
You've had a couple of days, obviously, now to digest the weekend's game. Is there anything that you've kind of seen looking over it that didn't kind of jump out at you right away?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I think, we're still digesting that we didn't get the full 3 points because I think it's a game that was under control for that. But then we reviewed the times we lost a little bit control, and when we dropped back, how it started to give more field to Toronto to operate. So we looked at that. We evaluated our numbers physically. It wasn't an easy game physically to deal with for both teams. We know it's also due to the weather. The other part that we need work and we're gonna improve there is when we have possession in the last and the opponent's half. I think we need more clarity on what we need to do in those areas of the field. So look, I think there was a lot of good things in the game, even some moments of transition that we just didn't take the right decision, or we give the ball too early, or we could have driven with the ball a little bit more. So there's a lot of things that we evaluate, and we felt that there's still a lot of things to grow as a team. And but again, it's better to work that with the 2 results that we had than with 2 negative results.
Colorado coming up at the weekend. They've had a tough and interesting start to the season. They look dangerous at set pieces, but then so do yourselves. Is this where you feel the game may be won at the weekend?
It's going to be a very important part, Michael. A part that is going to need a lot of attention from us. Colorado is an experienced team. Colorado is a team that did well in the games that they played in last season and made the playoffs. They were already dangerous on set plays last season, so they're continuing in those moments. Colorado is a team that in transition are very dangerous with the type of players they have. The 3-1 against Austin is a very tricky result when you watch the game again, and we watched the game Colorado and Austin, and we felt the result doesn't really reflect everything that happened in the game. But we have a group that is able to forget very quickly about yesterday and focus a lot on the game we have on Sunday. So again, we're preparing this game with very high levels of responsibility and awareness of the type of opponent. And, it's the points are very close. We started with a win a draw. They started with a draw and a loss, but at the end, only 3 points separate the two teams. So it's going to be, again, like every game that we see in our schedule, every game is going to be difficult, and this is another one.
What have you made of MLS, especially in the West, the first 2 weeks? There's been some interesting results, maybe surprises, but it certainly looks like teams like yourselves and the Galaxy that weren't in the playoff picture last year look to have strengthened, look to have got better. What have you made of the action so far?
I'm not going to give you my opinion on where I think the strengths are in MLS, because then I'm going to have a part of the league very upset at me. But right there with what I told you, you already know what I think. The games that we have are hard games. There's a lot of investment happening also in the West. Not only us, we became better, but everybody in our division became better. So it's hard, and you have to be ready for it. Look, this is what I could tell you on what I felt about the games and how I feel. You know what I'm a little bit, what I question a little bit, and maybe this is an opinion about how the league could be more West and including the West with the East. I don't like the format of only in the playoffs in your division, and then you play the West against the East in the final of the MLS Cup. I don't like that format. I think that they should be more mixed, like the number 2 of the East plays the number 7 of the West, and so on, and see how things pan out there. But look, we're in a tough division. We have a tough schedule. We're aware of that. That's why we take every game like a final, and we take it a game at a time.
Cheers, Marc.
Thank you, Michael.
He's the gaffer. You can't try it on with him. He's the gaffer. Even when he's on a limb. He's the gaffer. When his back's against the wall, has the answer to it all. He's the gaffer.
Marc Dos Santos there, the man with the plan, and the man who hopefully will bring 3 points back to Sandy, Utah, I guess.
Yeah. Woo!
Yeah.
Sweet home Utah.
All right, Nick. Well, where can people find you online to let you know that they disagree about Cavallini being a false 9?
Yeah, definitely. That's a hot take, a flaming hot take. Yes, Ace Age Robot 56.
And you can find me at Joe DC Van on Twitter. Thank you very much for listening to episode 447 of the AFTN podcast. Enjoy the game.
One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, there must be no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine.